and then check your YouTube to make sure it's running. Oh, there we go. We got
I
something.
think we're on, aren't we?
Scroll up.
There we go.
Okay. Go to Discord. Keep that window on top, and then go back to YouTube first. There we go. So we got that. You can minimize OBS. Now you can stop your streaming on Discord, so you can go to the main Discord window where we're talking, and then hit that little hit that little computer icon in the middle.
Mhm.
All right, so we got the stream down. We got that down. I gotta make sure my stuff is set. Oh right, hang on. Just I'm quickly running through my own OBS stuff.
No worries.
So just hang on. I got
It
desktop
says
audio.
we are live
Cool,
on
cool.
my channel.
And then I have audio output capture. I want window capture. Discord. Why is that not open? Open that there. Right click properties. Discord. Transform, fit to screen. And then hit start streaming on my end. All right. I think
Cool.
we're good. Let
I
me
think so
just
too. Yeah.
let me load up YouTube and make sure that my stream is live. If not, I still gotta paste the key.
Pretty sure mine is
Mm,
too.
Test. Just says we have a
I'm
good
live,
connection, but all right,
so let me go here.
showing. Mine's not showing our Discord video for some reason. Oh, hold on, I'm just testing something out. Nope. All right.
I think it's a little
Okay.
behind, but yeah.
So when I have it, when I have YouTube taking up the entire screen and it blocks
Uh,
out Discord entirely, it blocks out the video on your end. So yeah, we'll keep Discord
okay.
maximized. We'll keep YouTube. I'll keep YouTube for me at least on half of the screen.
Sure.
That way it won't completely block out the Discord call. But
Same here.
anyway, now that we're done with all the nonsense,
Same here.
hello everybody. My name is Holly, aka the Scientologeek, and I am here today with the awesome Mark Turi. Thank you for having enough patience to deal with me and OBS today. I
It's
understand that
all
was a little
good.
bit of a pain in the ass, but I'm glad we
It's
got it to
okay.
work. So thanks for
Same.
hopping on.
It's a pleasure. No, I've been live now for just over a minute, almost 2 minutes. So we got all the tech stuff out of the way, and it's all good.
Cool, cool. So I'm just kind of going to get right to it. So you were class
Yeah.
5 staff in Hungary, correct?
Not in Hungary. I was class 5 staff for a year total. 9 months of which I was in Germany, in Berlin, and then around 2.5 months I was actually in the U.S. in San Francisco.
Why'd they send you all the way to San Francisco?
Well, they first sent me to Berlin, or at least I went to Berlin because about a year and a half before I joined staff, I actually worked close to Berlin. I worked in Poland, just over the border, and I was in Scientology. I'd been in Scientology for about 2 years at that time, and the closest org was Berlin. And then they opened a new org in 2006, and eventually I ended up going there. And then there was this big nonsense with with the fact that I couldn't really stay. Like, for example, um, as any most people, if you enter Germany and a lot of countries, like you can enter visa free for like 3 months.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I got a residence permit after that 3 months, but it was only valid for a year after, and I signed a 2.5 year contract. So I really couldn't stay. I really couldn't necessarily be there, and there was some things going on with like immigration, just in general at the Berlin org, and eventually they transferred me to the United States, where I was able to get a proper visa, which is called an R1 religious workers visa, and I was able to get that, and then I was in San Francisco for only a couple of months until they determined this is like irony beyond irony. but then they determined that due to some of my past history, I was not qualified for staff, even though I had been on staff for an entire year. And it's a whole thing, but it's just like absolute insanity in Scientology, bureaucracy, ineptness, just really just unbelievable. And yeah, that's what took me to Berlin was just me wanting to go there, getting there, working there, and then them being like, well, you can't really stay here, so we'll ship you off to San Francisco, and then them telling me, well, you can't really be on staff anyway. It was insane. And then eventually I left. So, you know,
What
maybe it was a good thing.
disqualified you from staff?
Oh, well, I'm not sure. Um, Maybe it might be a little before your time, but maybe you've heard of it before, Holly, which is that back in the day in like the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a Microsoft Outlook news group, which was called ARS, alt.religion.scientology. Yeah. And so I subscribed to that maybe like 5 plus years, 5, 6, 7 years before I joined Scientology. And just the fact that I had subscribed to it, and I don't even remember if I read anything. I don't remember how long I even was subscribed. It didn't matter. ARS was considered a suppressive group. Now, mind you, when you first get into Scientology, they give you like an interrogation on an e-meter, and they ask you to disclose all of your, different affiliations and whatever. And I had been very forthcoming to the fact that I did join this news group because I was just interested Googling Scientology when I was probably 16. And, it's just like 99 at this point. Um, and I joined in 2005. But like, I cannot tell you how long I was on ARS because I don't remember. I don't remember if I read whatever. Just the sheer fact that I had subscribed means that it goes into your ethics folder, so it's like a permanent state there. So what they told me in San Francisco was that I shouldn't have even been a staff member in the first place because you're considered not qualified. It's like an actual decree that they give you, a declaration. And so just the fact that I went through, and we'll get into the actual schedule, how many hours I worked, how little pay I had after that year of this, like, just this legitimately insane year. And not to say that the other 2 years in Scientology were wasn't that, but I was just a public, so it was okay. But this, after this year of this whirlwind, this cycle of just unbelievable incompetence, I decided to leave because I thought to myself, I'd been at 9 months in Berlin and I wasn't even supposed to be there according to policy. So like it just I couldn't reason, I couldn't rationalize why I was even there, and all the stuff that I had gone through was basically for nothing because they should have taken me anyways, and I just left after that. Pretty much like once I returned, because I'm originally from Toronto, so once I went from San Francisco to Toronto, and I was like going to be home and whatever, and that was in May of 2008, and I was just like, forget it, threw my hands up and said, no more Scientology for me, I'm done. So it's sort of the Coles Notes version of it, as we say in Canada.
How long were you in total between being just public and staff?
So I joined Scientology in May 2005, and I actually was on the 14th of last month. It was my 20th anniversary of discovering Scientology. And then I was in for 3 years. So I was in from May 14th of May. I'm studying history. I'm a historian, so I'm very good with dates. But I discovered it on 14th May 2005, and I officially left on the 18th of May 2008. So pretty much 3 years. And as I said, two of those years were public, and one of those years was staff.
And how far did you get on both sides of the bridge?
Much. I did a lot of introductory courses. So like if you've seen, of course, the Bridge to Total Freedom, as it's called, the bridge. I started in the Dianetics little area. So my first course was called the Dianetics Hubbard Dianetics Seminar. My second course was the Hubbard Dynamics Auditors course. Then I did like Success Through Communication. I did a whole bunch of those introduction courses. And the only action that I got to do that was considered on the bridge was something called Method 1 Word Clearing, which normally there is a course for it, which is the very first course you're supposed to do on the training side. So when you train to become an auditor, that's like the first one that you do. I received method one word clearing. And if you know anything about word clearing, essentially it's trying to find misunderstood words. And what they do with M1 is you go on the E meter. Because normally when you're trying to find these MUs, you sit with someone like a course supervisor and they'll read a text and they'll say, okay, what is the mean in this sentence? It's like semantics beyond semantics. You have to define the word the, and then you have to define what, whatever. But what I got was a couple hours of just being on the e-meter, which I guess is supposed to be like really a really precise way of knowing whether or not the person actually or doesn't have MU. And I got that literally with sec checking just before I left San Francisco, like the last day or two before I left. So I was only an intro person, basically. No grades, no classes, nothing like that. Did not go OT, thankfully. Um, I would have found out about Xenu, and I don't know if you're familiar with some of the OT levels, but a lot of people talk about OT3. OT4 is actually my personal favorite one. That's the one where you
The
put your
druggy thetans.
yeah, you put your BTs, your body thetans through drug rehabilitation. It's like Hubbard was an evil genius, right? Like I could be like, okay, you get to OT3 and it's like, all right, this is a big story, I get it. But then he's thinking like, we got more stuff to do because he needs more money. Why don't we just put him through drug rehab? Like it's like at some point you got to laugh, and at some point you got to be really angry. At some point you got to laugh. You know what I mean? Like it's just at some point, because if not, some of this stuff is just it's horrific. I'm not trying to say it's a good thing, but I'm just saying, you know what I mean? In retrospect, looking back, it's like, oh my god, now we got to put them through drug rehab. You know what I mean? What an evil
Yeah.
genius, you know? But
Off topic, quick, just to make sure that we got this technical issue part out of the way.
no worries.
In your YouTube stream settings, do you have you changed like your title and all that stuff
I
for the
don't
stream?
think so.
Because at the
Roger
top of your
Anderson.
stream page, there should be a section that says edit, and you should be able to fix that
Yeah,
when you're
let me
looking at
do
your
that.
stream title.
So I've got my stuff up now. My friend Peter Anderson is on here. Uh,
Hello,
so
Peter.
edit video. I'm sorry, Holly. Video.
So in the, hang on. So when you have your window up where it shows like your chat and all that stuff,
Yes. Yeah.
um, if you open that window all the way for a second, and in the top right, to the left of your chat window should be a section that's a little button that says edit. Here, I'm gonna take a quick screenshot
Let me go
just to
back. Yeah, let me
show
go back.
you.
When I'm at my own uh, YouTube, I can't see this, so I just see blank screens.
I put it in Discord, so you should
Let
be
me
able
look at
to
that.
see the picture.
Let me see here.
And then near the top middle of that picture, there's a button that says edit.
The top middle. I'm sorry. Okay. Top middle. Oh,
Of the
that
picture.
edit. All right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yep.
Uh,
Just I figured I'd give you a second to like fix your title and description in case you have to.
okay. I think I've got it here. Yep, 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 yep. Okay. Let
Cool.
me do that. Sorry, everybody. I'm on what's it? ODS?
OBS, yep.
OBS.
Yeah,
OBS.
the whole thing acts kind of like BS. But
You might be too young to remember ICQ, the chat service ICQ. I always
can't
my
say I
friends
know
would
it.
be it's old school. It's 25 years old. But I seek you, ICQ.
Yep.
We were all I was I was like, I wonder what that stands for. My friend was just looked at me. He was like, "What do you think?" It said, "I see you." Come on.
I
Central
remember the well, actually, I should say I wasn't part of it, but the earliest one I knew about that I was alive during the time that it was up was the Yahoo Instant Messengers and the AOL Chat Messengers.
Oh yes, yep, 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 yep. Oh, I remember them too. I have a horrific story about Yahoo. Just very briefly here. So, well, I was 18 when 9/11 happened. So when I was at college, the morning it happened, and when I got home in the afternoon, I flipped open Yahoo Chat. Some of the most horrific, nastiest anti-Semitic and Islamophobic, homophobic comments on Yahoo Chat. And I was like, this is the internet. That was my awakening to how
Yep.
horrible the internet was. And that was a while ago, and I don't think much has changed, unfortunately. But anywho, it's just an anecdote um, about how terrible people are. But I think I did it. Let me just see here. I made the title. I'll add a description and a thumbnail. Yeah, okay, perfect. So I'll add a description and a thumbnail later for everyone. And as I said, I have my friend Peter here. All right, all is good.
Cool, cool. Yep, I see the changes on my end when I
Yeah,
open up your stream. So everything's good.
cool. Yeah.
Sweet. All right, so back to staff. Um, what training did you have to go through to actually join staff? Like I figured you'd have to go through the staff status packs and all that stuff, but
Well,
what did
really,
you
I mean, like, really, anyone can join staff. I mean, you should probably, if you wanted to actually be on staff. I mean, other than actually having to have another set of income, probably it's best that you have some Scientology, even if it's just introductory services or training. You should probably have some of that. But they also don't care. Like, there are people that they took off the street, who didn't last on staff for more than a week, who had no Scientology experience. In my case,
Mhm.
I had these 2 years of doing probably a couple dozen of these introductory courses and what are called extension courses, and sort of dabbing in and out of all these types of things, reading books, doing a course, and so forth, and doing these Dianetics courses, so the auditor, the seminar, and then the auditor course. I got a couple hundred hours of what's called twinning, co-auditing. So you co-audit with someone back and forth on Dianetics. So there's no e-meter on that. But once I got onto staff, I had to actually finish the course that I was previously on, which I did. And then I finished that extension course and I went directly, which was, I think, the Science of Survival or the Self Analysis Extension course, regardless. And then I went right on to Staff Status Zero. You do zero, one, and two. But you are assigned to a post first. So when you let's just say you arrive at staff for your very first day, which for me was in May of 2007. I want to say the 13th of May, 2007. Again, dates are my thing, so I remember these things. I arrived in the morning, and I think it was a Monday. Uh, and what you do is you get a check sheet, which anyone again that's familiar with any type of Scientology course, as soon as you get into a course, you have this check sheet, which is a step-by-step process of all the things you're supposed to be reading and doing, and it's all in order. And then you must have someone sign it. Okay. So I got my stop status zero check sheet, and stop status zero is just a familiarization of the org itself. So it's a course that I think I only did in 1 or 2 days. It's very, very easy course, but it's basically you going to different actual people. Of course, they call terminals or posts in an org, and you have to see someone. Like, you've got to see people in treasury. You've got to see all this kind of stuff, and you familiarize yourself with these various people, and you have the check sheet. So you go up to them and say, hi, introduce yourself. Are you, so, the whatever, post it is. They'll say yes, and then they kind of give you like a spiel, and then they'll sign it off. You might get something from them. Like, for example, I was in the Treasury Division, and so eventually I was in the department that was responsible for staff records and also for uniforms. So in an ideal org, we had uniforms. In a Sea Org, they'll have uniforms. We're not going to have that really in a non-ideal org. But it was like my job to bring new recruits like ties, shirts, pants, etc. So when you give it to a new staff member, you got to sign your initials, and then you have to make like an actual folder. It's a red color folder for staff, and you sort of do all these things, and you could just go through. Then usually with you, I forget the name of the person. My friend Sabrina would probably know. Um, work in HCO, and of course, HCO is the Hubbard Communication Office. And let me just put on. You can hear me, yeah? Everything's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Sometimes when I go to do not disturb, it cuts off my mic. But yeah, I forgot to do that.
Nope.
So you go with someone from HCO, and this is the big thing. This is the org board. Okay. So the org board is again this big, massive. It's insane, and it's so much bureaucracy. But it's really like how the organization is structured, and there's literally a physical, actual board with people's posts and names, and they're all in this kind of hierarchy. You can see it. There's 7 divisions. Each division, which starts with 7, goes to 6, A, B, and C, and then they all have their different departments and whatever, and their names of people are there, and they put their processing grades if they've had, or their training grades if they have it. They put it on the org board. The whole purpose is for you to get familiar with all the people and then familiar with the org board, so when you're assigned something, you know where you are. So you essentially know that you're just one piece. Like it's almost like getting lost in sort of some big collective mass. You're not really an individual anymore, although that's not what they say. But it's sort of, you're sort of losing some sense of individuality, and now you're becoming one with the group, and now the group kind of takes over. So it's all just familiarity, some indoctrination, of course, and you getting used to the fact that you're going to have to see certain people on a daily routine or on a whatever routine, and so on. So that's just status zero, and again, it might take a couple days or something to get through. It's nothing too big.
I just gotta check something quick. Shit. Did I lose you?
No worries.
Oh, nope, I'm good.
But
All right,
again,
cool.
it's nothing. It's
Um,
nothing crazy.
I had one question that showed up in the chat from Peter. Um, how did you first? What religious faith, if any, were you brought up with?
Well, my parents, I have Jewish and Christian family, but my parents are very, very liberal. So they didn't force their religion on me at all. I was introduced to their Christianity and their Judaism growing up. And then it was basically by the time I was 18, it was sort of whatever I wanted to do. My parents were supportive. I was very, very lucky in that way. Never went to Sunday school, never went to Hebrew school, never had anything forced upon me, which I think can be very traumatic. And I certainly understand why some people might reject the whole concept of religion because of a traumatic childhood. And I have all the sympathies in the world for those individuals. I just did it differently. I had very like hippie parents, and they were just kind of like, whatever you want to do, we'll support you. But when I was 18 until I was 22, and even after I left from 25 onward, I was very lucky enough, and I got myself very curious to the point where I dipped into and investigated a ton of different religions and philosophies and ideas. And some of them stuck and some of them didn't. But for me, the one of the things that Scientology at least did for me initially was from 18 to 22, I had been back and forth to different groups, different religious groups, Jewish groups, Muslim groups, Christian groups, Buddhist groups, Hindu groups. I mean, you name it. I had tried it. And Scientology itself advertises itself as being not exactly like a religion in the traditional sense, although of course it is. They advertise themselves as being something almost like I know you're in the Northeast, so you might be familiar with the Unitarian Universalist Association. They call themselves a creedless faith. Like you have people who have different beliefs that are. That's what Scientology likes to think of themselves as. We have different theological ideas. So if you are an atheist, agnostic, theist, whatever, you can join. Or if you're Christian or Buddhist, whatever, you can join. And I was kind of attracted to that. And so they made all these kinds of promises. And then one of the things is I had just been trying to study Buddhism for about a year before I joined Scientology. And Scientology, in some ways, advertises itself not publicly. It advertises itself as being kind of a new version of Buddhism. When you start Scientology, at least when I did, I was listening to a lot of lectures by L. Ron Hubbard, and he made a lot of critiques of Buddhism, which was that, according to him, Buddhism was just sitting on a mat meditating, wasn't doing anything, and so his Buddhism was practical, and he also referred to himself as the Maitreya Buddha, the Buddha of the future. So, which is all BS. But regardless, as I said, I grew up in a very liberal household, and I was kind of, I don't know, what do you want to say, a seeker of something. And Scientology advertised all these things that I thought I wanted or I thought I was going to get. And then, of course, 3 years later, the opposite happens. It's a fundamentalist faith, it's a dogmatic faith, it's extremely homophobic and transphobic. I mean, disgusting. They are most people in Germany that I work with are very anti-immigrant, very intolerant, very right-wing. Like, just it's not a free thinking. You're all everyone's welcome kind of thing. You got to have money basically, or you become a staff member or Sea Org member. And I became very disillusioned with that. I think again, maybe had I had a different religious upbringing, my outcomes would have been different. But what can I say?
Did you find that Scientology possibly conflicted with your parents' religious beliefs and ideologies?
I mean, not at first, right? Because that's how they advertise themselves, right? They advertise themselves as being very open minded. They say, of course, we have, people of all different religions, right? Which is BS. But that's what they advertise themselves to be. There's a book, I'm not sure if you've seen it, Holly. It's called What is Scientology? It's quite a large book. It was printed in the 70s and then reprinted in 1998. I actually used to have a second copy, like the second edition. And one of the introductory chapters is about how Scientology is a culmination of all religions. So it's taking that kind of, like, if you've ever investigated like the Baha'i faith or even like other groups that they call universalist faith, like the UU or whatever, where the idea is that it's kind of this new age thing. They call it syncretism, like, oh, we're just taking from all the wisdom and knowledge from all these different faiths. But it all comes down to Hubbard, and Hubbard, I don't think, knew anything about much of anything. He had horrible, horrible comments that he made about black people and Asian people, like horrible stuff, horribly racist things. And I don't, I again, all of it is advertising. And I guess the mindset that where I was in the first little while when I joined Scientology was, again, trying to fulfill that need, a kind of like need to be belong somewhere, and a need to have like all of these different things that I was learning about coalesce into one thing, rather than having multiple different, like, because I'm a type of person who just says, like, I think that, whether it's conflicting or not, I still think that we can take little bits of stuff through tons of different subjects to find little pieces of truth everywhere. That's a good thing or a bad thing. Like in Scientology, it's mostly negative, but that's the truth. It's mostly negative. Um, but we can take little kernels and bits. It doesn't have to be necessarily just from one source. But Scientology is not like that. It's not what they call pluralistic. It's absolutist. And I think for me, it just fulfilled that need maybe very an idealistic need in my head as a young person of, wanting everything and expecting everything, and then finding out later Scientology is exactly the opposite. It's just horrific. So as far as my parents were concerned, and briefly, they were obviously concerned because my growing up, my father had a friend who was in Scientology. He had joined Scientology, and like this, actually, his sister, friend of his, a sister of his best friend, of my dad. They grew up together. She had joined Scientology, married a Scientologist. She lived in Los Angeles for a long time. So he always had stories of like, oh, it's a cult and whatever. And of course, my mom knew about that because, they knew this person. But they never actually told me, like, they never pointed their finger and said, don't go. I forbid you to go. So in that case, when I left, that's when my parents were more open about it. And I was ready to hear their criticisms 3 years later, rather than 3 years before when I first started. They were not happy about it, mind you, but they didn't really point their fingers at me. So in that case, I'm quite lucky in that respect.
Now, when you joined staff, once you did all your training and stuff, what were your posts? What posts have you
Yeah.
held?
So once I did my step status 0, I got posted to what's called the Hubbard Dianetics Foundation, which is also kind of a front group scam type thing, because every Hubbard Dianetics Foundation is located in the Church of Scientology, but they are the foundation within the church that advertises for Dianetics. And so when you see people on the street in a major city or something, you'll see them selling Dianetics. That comes from the Dianetics Foundation. Again, front group type thing. And I was writing letters. I was a letter registrar within the Hubbard Dianetics Foundation. And I remember, and this is like the most insane thing I think I've ever done. Some American guy in 1970 whatever, 75, I guess, bought a Dianetics book in Berlin, okay, and gave his address. So, once you're in what they call the central files, the CF files, once you're there forever. So I remember every week coming across this gentleman, his information, where I don't remember the name of the town. I don't even think there was a town. I think it was like a rural road, like one of these rural roads, like a farm that's like wasn't even a part of a town in Georgia. And it just said the guy's name, the gentleman's name, I should say, and the address, and that he had bought the book in 1975. Every week I was writing letters to this person like, hey, you bought a book in 1975, and this went on and on and on. And it was always in English because I didn't speak German, and they didn't care about that. They should have, but they didn't. And I was just writing letters to people who had bought Dianetics books, God knows when, sometimes 70s, 80s, 90s, sometimes, the day before, whatever. And I would keep doing that over and over and over. And I did that for the first couple months. And then after that point, they put me into the Treasury division, and I was in charge of what's called records, assets, and material, which I think is like Division 8 or 9, something like this, or Department 8 or 9 on the board. And then that's when I was doing like bank reconciliations, bookkeeping stuff, clothing, keys, um, files for the records for staff and publics, and on and on and on. And I did that until I left Berlin. And then when I got to San Francisco, I was it's called an establishment officer. Although I was only there for a couple months, I didn't really do much. But I was an establishment officer for Division 7, which is the executive division. And an establishment officer is basically someone who makes sure that everyone in their division is on policy. So you're kind of like a policy police kind of. So you don't actually like do anything as far as what they call production. So when I was the letter reg, I was writing letters. My statistics was letters per week. when I got to Treasury, there was different statistics where I was doing things. So as an establishment officer, it's your job basically to go to different people in a particular division, sit down with them and run through policies. And if they don't remember, if they have MUs or whatever, have to you have to keep drilling them until they're on policy. So I forget what you call that. Like they have people like that in certain companies. It's not HR, I know that, but it's more like just people whose sole job it is to make sure everyone is, you know, theoretically on the same page. So
Basically, a compliance officer.
that's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, but in an actual job, I mean, there's good things those people do, but in Scientology, it's a complete waste of time because all of what Scientology is it's just output, right? It's just output. The whole thing is output. There's no future planning. Everything's week to week. It's the most ridiculous, horrible organization. And when you take people off their posts to talk to them about policy, they're not doing the output. So it's like so then their statistics go down. Then they don't make as much money. It's like it's just so dumb. Like I don't know. What I felt staff was it was like just metaphorically. It's not even a perfect metaphor, but just running and sprinting, hitting a wall, and then running and sprinting again and hitting a wall, and running and sprinting again and hitting. Like everything you do, there's just some kind of wall, or there's just something in your way. Like you just cannot do your work. You can't work in peace. There's a lot of this compliance. There's a lot of micromanaging. But then the whole point you're being told is to produce, produce, produce. Well, if you left me alone, I could produce, but they don't do that. And I don't think that's by an accident. I think that's by design, the way to control people. And part of that, at least that's what makes sense to me. It's not just pure luck that it's bureaucratic. I think it's bureaucratic by design for nefarious reasons, as per Hubbard and his, the whole cult thing, right? So,
And that's I had a two-part discussion with Chris Shelton
Mhm.
regarding statistical management and the
Oh,
fucking crazy nonsense that goes into it, especially at the middle management level. Um, but did y'all ever have any SO missions come to your orgs for any particular reasons?
yeah, Corey did. Because Berlin was an ideal org and it was the first ideal org in Germany, we had three Commodore messengers, which we called the Missionaire 1, Missionaire 2, Missionaire 3. And one gentleman is Missionaire 3 was a guy named Hans Smith, who ended up being in a hate video against Mike Rinder. And then our Missionaire 2 was, I forget her first name. Zara was her first name. Now I remember it. Last name Kotrick, and she was married to the CO, so the commanding officer of CLO, which is the Continental Liaison Office of Europe. So it's Walter Kotrick, who I got to meet, and he's an idiot. But he was a okay. Here's the thing with Scientology. He's like a world class professional chef. So you would think that's what he would be doing in the Sea Org, which he was. And then they took him off his post to become a commanding officer at a Continental Liaison Office. A chef, it's like no offense to anybody, but like if you're skilled in something and then all of a sudden they throw you into admin, like you're a skilled chef and they throw you into admin personnel, it's not going to work out. So it's not his fault that he was kind of a dope. I forget who the missionaire one was. I told Aaron I thought it was a woman named Angie Blankenship, but it may have been her. It may not have been her. I don't know. But what I just want to say with that is like, yeah, man, those Sea Org members are living in another planet, and they do not take no for an answer. Even if no is like, hey, reality, this is reality. I can't stay up for a whole week to get my stats in. They don't care. They just don't care. Not when they're missionaries.
Now, when you were, what were you, Director Ram?
Year round, yeah.
Um, one of the things I ended up learning about recently, well, semi-recently, was I went through the entire finance series and tried to learn
Wow.
about how the church does their financial planning and all the bullshit with the advisory council, the executive
Hmm.
council, I think, and the FBO, and just all
Hmm.
the nonsense about the beans and just, oh God,
Well,
it's
yeah.
like I read through it once. I read the whole thing just front to back, just end. But in there, everything is so, I don't know. You expect that there's, hang on. Actually, you know what? This requires a whiteboard thing.
Hey, go ahead. I'm a visual learner, so.
So you have subject one,
Hmm.
and you would think it would take up, say, one entire policy, and then
Right.
you have subject two, another policy. Subject
Hmm.
three, another policy. No, fucking
No.
subject one stuff is here, here, here,
Yeah.
and over here. And
Yeah.
now you gotta somehow gather all of the bullshit in a one fucking thing.
Hmm.
So I went through the policies once raw, and then I had to actually like take notes on them to try to organize everything into one cohesive structure because I could not understand Hubbard's nonsense the first time around.
It's not easy. Um, I was only in Treasury for about 7 months. And although I had not finished my staff status two, because from staff status here you go to one, I had not finished staff status two because I had a really bad conflict with one of the course supervisors. They had these two course supervisors. One was amazing, one was horrific. The one that was amazing, of course, was kicked off staff because she was actually amazing. And the one that was horrific stayed, and she was horrific. So I stopped going to courses. But I had to actually advance in uh, uh, my post. And so I ended up having to actually read policies from what's called a hatting courses. So after you stuff those two, you have a mini hat. So I have the DRM mini hat and then the full hat. So I was reading policies exactly like that, like on how to do my job, and none of it helped. My job, what I did was purely on the job train myself, like literally stand in front of this computer to do bank reconciliations and not understanding and I mean like remember those if you've ever seen those computers, those like Hewlett Packard computers from like the mid to late 80s, and it's all DOS. It's like one, and then you tell the computer what you're doing. So they have their own special software. I forget the name of it, but they have their own special banking software, which is from the 80s and 90s. So I would be at this computer, which was hella old, and the screen would pop up and it'd be like one, and then it would whatever two, and then you'd have to press number. I just went through it over a week to figure out what was going on to get to the level to get to the area on where I could do my job, because nobody tells you because everyone's busy and the policies don't matter and no one can tell you anything about it. So I was sitting there pressing numbers for a whole week, figure out finally I can get to the area where I'm supposed to be. And then I was writing everything down and trying to go back to the policies. They don't match. It's so frustrating. And then when I finally got there after a week, the treasury secretary was like, "Okay, well, just need this stack of like banking receipts," and like, "Oh yeah, we can now balance our books." And I never finished the project, and I was there for 7 months. I never balanced anything. I never. They spend. They have receipts all the time. They have the paper trails, but it's never logged in. And then part of that is, telexes. They still use telex. So part of my job was writing telexes to Flag, where they have like the Flag banking office, because of course, as you know, every org has a flag banking officer, an FBO. They're a representation of flag, which is in Clearwater, Florida, because of course Scientology has to take a percentage of everything you do. And by Scientology, I mean David Miscavige, because let's face it, that's what it goes to. He's the one who's profiting. But just that, like just to reconcile, be like, okay, in this month we had this much in, this much out. We had to log everything. It was already logged, but I had to log it in the computer. And again, I we had backlogs. They opened the Ideal Org officially in January of 2007. I got on post, I guess, in July. I left February 2008. I don't think I was even close. Like maybe I was 20% like caught up. Like if and it was just every day doing the same this. I could have told you years ago. I think I pressed one and then three and then seven or whatever, and that's how I got to the screen. And then what I would have to type in anyway. It's a long, boring story because finance sucks. But you're absolutely correct. It's nuts. And when you read Hubbard, Hubbard does not have any linear storytelling, put it this way. He does flashbacks and flash forwards all the time. It's like he's like a Memento, which is a great movie, wonderful movie, Memento. But that's not good for business policies. you know, am I watching the beginning at the beginning, or I'm watching the end at the beginning, or I'm watching the middle at the beginning? And is the end really the end, or is it really the beginning? That's not what you want when you're like, hey, let's have some cohesion in our organization.
And it's also stupid when they're having you look at stuff from the 70s, 80s, whatever, and the software, well, in your case, it wasn't updated, but
No,
if
no,
you have like an updated piece of software that you have to use, Hubbard didn't fucking write anything on it.
no.
And yet he still has this format that he wants you to follow while using whatever piece of software you're using, and somehow you have to stick to the old format on the new stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
oh my god, did you guys have to draw your stat charts out by hand, or was this something you guys did computerized?
Oh, that's a great question. I can't recall. I think I remember learning to do it manually. I would have to say probably we did it manually. I don't ever recall using a computer to do that. So
And
what I would do, I'll just give you one of my stats. One of my stats was um, called assets and reserves. So, for example, the org had about 150,000 euros at the time of assets and reserves, which is just a basic accounting thing of um, all the stuff basically in the org is an asset reserve. So that was anything that the org had that wasn't actually like a, how would I say it? It wasn't actually like part of the physical building. So it was chairs, desks, printers, Xerox machines, like anything that was external, I guess, or what was an actual product that you could potentially resell. And it was the value of all of those things. So it was everything down to the microwave and the cafeteria, like everything. So my statistic would be based on that. So that for, and I'll just give you a very brief example here. So I remember in the summer of 2007, the org received actually a donation of a Xerox, an actual Xerox machine from a public member, and I went out with a couple people in a van to get that Xerox machine to bring it down, and it had been determined that retail value was about 5,000 euros. So that meant my stat went up. So like my that stat had stayed ecstatic, the same for like months because nothing really broke or anything. Like we never really had any problems. But then it went up, and so like I would be drawing on a graph pretty much with a ruler, and then it goes up. So yeah, that's how like meticulous everything is, and all that stats garbage. And I had other stats I can't even remember what I did, but that was always the one that stuck out the most was assets and reserves because nobody ever wanted to actually count everything. That was another issue.
now, how did you? did you have to bring you had to bring your stat up, right? So
Mhm.
it's like you had to get more, so that you were then focused on getting more people in, more money and stuff in reserves, correct? But the problem is you're not the one bringing the people in. That's Div 4, Div 6. You're Div 3. Why the fuck is that part of you?
Well, there is this absolute insane thing in a Church of Scientology. So let's say you walk into, hypothetical now, you walk into an org and you want to drop whatever it is, 20 bucks, 50 bucks, thousands of dollars on a service or a product. So you want to buy a book, you want to sign up for a course. There's two people, and this is what's so insane about Scientology. There's two people that can receive your money before it goes to the bank part. So you either pay, which most people do, which is the Div 4 registrar. And if you pay the Div 4 registrar, that money, so let's say it's 50 bucks for a course, that 50 bucks goes into what's called a gross income, which means the staff is paid by part of that money. However, there's also the director of income, which I think is like Div 7, I want to say. I think 7, 8 is disbursements, if I'm not mistaken. Regardless, if you pay the dear income, then the money for those courses and products go to pay the bills, which is really stupid because both they both will walk up and down the halls. When we had a dear income, which when I was on staff we never had one, but when you have a dear income and a registrar, they like walk up and down the halls outside of course rooms to gutsy up the people for their next service. And it's like, why are we taking one? Why is one gross income only for staff pay, and then one which goes to the whatever it's called, the other income, net income or something, and it only goes to pay the bills? It's so stupid. Most companies, what they do is they take that sum of whatever they make in a week, and then they have accountants that allocate for different things. And that's how, and of course, if you're not making any money, that's how you go out of business because you're not going to have enough money to do everything. But you don't segregate, for lack of a better term, gross income from staff pay to what you're going to pay your bills. And it all comes from the same money. It all comes from the same source. It's all gross income. It shouldn't be one part is gross income and then one part is to pay your bill. It's all the same thing. And I again think that comes down to control because then you get into competition. Then you get into like people get angry. Like if nobody likes the dear income except for treasury because the dear income will be like, oh, I just got someone to drop $1,000 on auditing, and everybody hates them because that's $1,000 that they're not going to see in their staff pay. But then Treasury loves them because that's $1,000 that we can actually pay our phone bill or something. And it's so stupid. But again, the only thing that makes sense to me is that it's part of pure incompetence, which I still think is malicious and like this evil genius of L. Ron Hubbard. I can't put my mind on it being just a coincidence. I think it's part of this predatory nature of Scientology, where everything is competitive. There's no actual community, and it's just always pinning people against each other. So that was one thing where I was just like, who cares? If you pay the dear ram or like I don't get it. Plus again, step pay usually doesn't amount to squat anyway because nobody's in Scientology. But I mean, again, why you have these two different accounts? Like, what's the point?
Now, since you were working with all the money and stuff, did it
Yeah,
aggravate you at all seeing how much money came in versus how much staff was actually making?
yeah, and also how much money went up to because you always like so Scientology has these publication organizations, which is Golden Era and New Golden Era and Bridge publication. I forget which one is European and I forget which one is North American. It doesn't matter. but they make books. So what Mark Hadley told me is, when they make these products, they make them for pennies because they're just raw materials because Sea Org members don't get paid anything. And then from the publication, they actually sell them to the orgs, and then the orgs will sell them to the parishioners, and it's marked up every time. So you're inventing something that is literally could be $1, and then you're selling it to the orgs for a lot more than $1. It could be tens or whatever, and you're selling it even more. And so that really got to me was the fact that, again, these things are basically being made for raw materials. The raw materials to publish a book is next to nothing. It's paper. Okay, yes, they do need a printing press. So it does cost something. Totally fine. But there's no labor involved because the Sea Org members only they have Bridge Publication and at New Era. They don't get paid per hour. They don't have any, as you know, they don't have any retirement. They don't have any benefits. They don't have health insurance, nothing like that. So it's not like, oh, if I go to a bookstore like Barnes and Noble and you've got this actual, Penguin books, they've got, why it's $50 is because at least part of it's going to people who are actually working and so forth, and they might be unionized and whatever. And so that really disturbed me. And I was able to follow that trend because I would get through assets and reserves, I would be getting one of the things that happened was I was on staff during the release of the basics. And the basics, all those new books when they reprinted all the books again, which was in the summer, I think June, July of 2007. Those books, there's a lot of them, but like at Bridge Publications, like they were selling those entire things for like $3,000-4,000 for a couple dozen books, and they're made for less than 100. And then they're being sold to our org for a reasonable price, comparative, because then we're selling those books at 25 euros a piece, but altogether like maybe 2 or 3,000 euros. And so I literally saw step one, step two, step three. So you've got a few dollars in some cases to maybe tens of dollars to hundreds or thousands of dollars. And again, that disturbed me so much because it's just profiting. You're not supposed to be a nonprofit organization. It's supposed to be religious, it's supposed to be a church. Like, that's what they're supposed to be. They're not, obviously. But, it's that, again, that really disturbed me seeing that amount of profit margins and profit increases in a so-called nonprofit organization. you know,
Yep. Um, did you ever bring it up to anybody? Like, did you ever write any kind of report or anything on anything you saw? Like, I mean, I'm sure you wrote your fair share of knowledge reports, but
Mhm.
I don't know. It's like, did you ever report anything you thought was like corrupt within the system, or did you just like avoid it to stay out of ethics trouble?
I would have private conversations with my roommate, who was also a staff member. We would have conversations. People had conversations, usually one on one. Luckily, I know that there is a snitching culture, but luckily, like the snitching culture in Berlin, at least when I was there, was not as bad. So, as long as you kind of kept it, if you criticized, for example, an individual Scientologist, that was less damning than the whole organization. So we would hate the executive director. We would hate our supervisors. We tell them, we call them by name. We call them names, which I'm not proud of, but it happens. Four-letter words, whatever. Hated that course supervisor, so whatever, and I would write reports on her. But you would never contradict the system. So it was more like there's something wrong with the people in our organization because the organization overall is so good. So it has to be the suppressive people and the PTS people in Berlin who, who are doing it wrong, because we're looking at, videos 5 times a year at these events of other orgs that are excelling. And of course, they're all propaganda videos, but we're like, well, it must be better in San Francisco, it must be better in Tampa, it must be better in Mexico City, it might be, must be better in Milan. And of course, it's not, but that's what we come to believe. So we do a lot of self-blaming, but you would never want to blame Hubbard. You never blame Miscavige. You never take it any higher than an individual, because then you get in trouble.
So y'all, as pretty much everybody on staff, fell for the birthday game manipulation tactics.
Which we won, by the way. Berlin won.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we won. And my friend Sabrina, who would be interesting to speak to, when I left to go to San Francisco, they had won the birthday game, Berlin, the Berlin org, the year that I was there, because we fake generated a ton of statistics. It was absolute bullshit. But there was a staff member that I knew, that I worked with, who had a company that I think was like defrauding people and also like funneling money to the org. And they got caught. And there was this, what they called the Berlin flap. It's the famous Berlin flap of like 2008, 2009. I was not there at the time. It didn't matter that we were cheating our statistics. I can tell you about that. The whole time everyone was cheating just to win the birthday game that year, which was again the first year after we were established. So that was the big thing. And we won it internationally. But this Berlin flap in like 2008 and 9, which had to do with fraud. I think there was some charges, if I'm not mistaken. My friend Sabrina will know more. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's illegal or anything. They don't really care. They only care when you get caught. So even if you have a business and you're defrauding people and you know, um, scamming people, and I don't know the exact specifics about this case, but you know that there's a lot of companies that are started by Scientologists. They're like investment type companies. So you say, okay, invest in us and maybe we'll buy property or we'll do something in it, or we have a company, we're going to make a product. And they take those thousands, if not millions of dollars, and they basically use it to fund their own bridge, to do their own services. So there's no real estate, there's no product, there's no invention that they're going to make. They just take your money and they tell you one thing. It's like like a Ponzi scheme or something, whatever it's called. So there's been tons of Scientologists. They don't care about that. There was the whole Chase banking thing, but Chase banking, credit card scams. No, they don't care. If you don't get caught, then they don't care where the money comes from. And so this is one of the things that also, once I left, I realized what was happening with these businesses and so forth, and obviously was one of the many reasons why I decided to go and leave. But again, they don't care as long as you're not caught. Doesn't matter to them.
Now, I'm gonna probably end up keep going back to this just from
Of course.
the videos I did with Chris, just to recap the knowledge and just to make sure I have my bullshit right. Um, I was looking at one of the charts and you mentioned like that you guys won the birthday game and all that stuff. And one of the charts I have is from like the 70s and it goes up for 2 3 weeks and then it crashes and then it goes up for 2 3 weeks, then it crashes, then it goes up for 2 3 weeks, crashes, but it doesn't seem to go above ever the peak of those 2 to 3 weeks. It keeps hitting the same peak, crashing, same peak,
Mhm.
crashing, same peak, crashing, but never actually expanding.
Yeah,
Is
and
that
that's
is that
what
how it was with you guys fudging for the points?
what what would happen with us. What would happen with us was two types of things. So if everything was natural, sometimes somebody just comes in and drops like $100,000. It happens. Like it happens a couple times a year. Just for whatever reason, a longtime Scientologist just wants to get auditing, and so they just. I remember it happened twice in Berlin. Somebody dropped €100,000 one week, and about a month or two later, they dropped about €80,000. And so that happens, and it's all for auditing mostly. So that happens. What we were doing was a little bit different. So in my case, with the whole assets reserve thing, we had unaccounted assets and reserves. So like the whole library that we had, which was on the highest floor, the sixth floor, we had a really nice library up there, and we had like course packs from all the auditor courses and all this kind of stuff. We had some books, we had the basics, we had recordings, we had those things called the congresses, which were lecture series, but like none of it were counted. So I would get there was a person in the org called the OES who is in the organization executive secretary, and that person would be in charge, I think, of division 3, 4, and 5, which is treasury, technical, and qualifications. So she would come to me and she would say, like, okay, your general assets and reserves are about 150,000. We got the Xerox machine, whatever. But like, we need the statistic to go up a little bit. We don't want it to go up a lot. We want it to go up a little bit. So go to the library. Have a list of. I would have a list of all the worth. All like this is one of the reasons why I knew that the price that we received a book for, like a Dynex book, was like 5 or 10 euros, but we were selling them for like 25 or 30. Is one of the reasons I had this list, which had the price we bought them and then the price we sold them for. So I would go up to the library and it would be like, yeah, just give us a little bit more. So like count like 100 euros or 50 euros. And so that way, when we report the statistics, I'm reporting it going up a little bit. And so that's what's called a stat push. It's a very weak stat push, but that's what you do. What you're talking about is more like what happens in most orgs. You have a lot of production because of those random people coming in. For some reason, you just get lucky. You get a lot of foot traffic. You hit a very big place, like a square, or you're outside of a big public library or something, some public area, or there's like a food festival or something, or a beer festival, whatever. You just happen to get a lot of more production. And then some days there's nothing because of the weather, of less foot traffic, of who knows. And then it goes up and down. And that's really what Scientology is. It's like the highs are pretty high, the lows are very low. It's really very, very, very odd when it comes to things like production, because some weeks are amazing and some weeks, and by the way, everything is week to week. So there are no quarters. There's no such thing as a quarter in Scientology. You don't plan for a quarter of 4 months or whatever, 3 months, 4 months. You don't do that in Scientology. You plan for a week. So when someone drops 100,000 euros on auditing, your your staff pay is higher, and because that goes to your gross income. And if one week you only get, a couple thousands, then you're going to make literally maybe a few euros. And that's just what it is. And it's all predicated on people coming in to Scientology, which nobody's doing in great numbers. Back in the day, when Scientology was doing really well, was probably from around the 60s to maybe about the 90s, like early 90s. And then, as you probably heard, the golden age of tech, which is around 96, crashed everything. It started to crash with when David Miscavige came in. But even in the early 90s, like really, even in then, certain orgs were doing pretty well and they were able to pay their staff a decent amount, but that never lasted. It's called being St. Hill size. Orange County org went St. Hill size, San Francisco went St. Hill size. There's this idea that if you just get more auditors, more production, more people on staff, then the staff pay will be like a minimum wage or higher job. But if it ever materialized, it only happens for a very brief amount of time, and then that's it. And so there's no org other than the Sea Org orgs that are making enough that would even be able to pay their staff a regular salary. And so I ended up getting paid anywhere from 10, 11 euros for a couple weeks, all the way up to about 85, 86 was the highest. and my average was around 22 to 25 euros a week. And that was my pay. That was for the whole week, you know. And I worked a lot of hours for that, you know.
How many hours per week were you working? So, based on what you told me, you weren't foundation staff, you were day staff.
It
Or
wasn't
were you
day or
day and
foundation.
foundation? Okay, because you didn't have
I
enough
was,
people to split the
I was,
departments.
I was full time. So if you're aware of the schedule, and again, probably from Chris or from that is the day schedule is basically Monday through Friday. You work essentially from about 9 o'clock to about 6, roughly, and then foundation usually start around 7. You have to be there at 6, but you start working at 7. You leave about 10. And then on Saturday and Sundays, it's usually all day. It's usually like from 9 to 6, which is a very evasive, horrible schedule. So you don't get any rest, basically. But what happens in Scientology, well, at least from my introduction, is when they don't have a day or foundation org. But I had no idea that there's only one org in some orgs, but then there are these two orgs, these day foundation. I didn't know that Berlin only had one org. So when I got there, how they explained it to me was that if they break down a day into what they call 4 time periods, okay? So they start at 9 a.m. and they go to about 2.5 hours. Excuse me, start about 9:30. Excuse me, you start at 9:30, and then you go to 12, and then you get lunch, which is until 1, and then from 1 to I think it's about 2 or 3:15, and then there's like a break, and then there's the third schedule, and then the which goes until about 6, and then there's dinner for about 45 minutes, and then you've got your evening. So really, it's from 9 in the morning until 11 at night. We're on full time, right? Obviously, the full schedule is 28 periods, 28 time periods. When you work full time, you only get 2 of those off. So that means that you only get 2, and it can be any 2, but you only get 2 off when you work full time. And so for me, I would take like Friday and Saturday mornings off. So my schedule was 9:30 Monday to Friday, 9:30 or 9 o'clock. It's kind of been a little while, so I'm trying to figure out. So I think it was 9:30. Excuse me, 9:30 to 12. So that's the first period. Then you have lunch at 12 until 12:45, because then you actually have to be at a muster 15 minutes before. So 9:15 muster, 9:30 starts the first period. That goes to 12 noon where you stop. You have lunch till 12:45. At 1 o'clock, you start the second period, which goes until 3:15. You then get 15 minutes for the afternoon break. From 3:30 until 6 is the third period. And then from 6 to 6:45 is dinner. 6:45 you have your muster. And then from 7 to 10 you have, or 7 to 11, 7 to 10 or 7 to 11 you have your final period, quote unquote period. And so of all of those time periods, only 2 a week I was able to take off. So that meant that I went to work from Sunday to Thursday. The org I had to be in the org at 9:15, and I would leave after 11. So that's a 14-hour day right there, 5 days a week. And then on the days that I had my mornings off, when I just slept, I had to be in New York at 12:45, and then I would work until at least 11 again or afterwards. So that's at least another 10-hour day. So I calculated that. So we do that once about 92 hours um, of work with breaks. With breaks, it's around 75, I think, 75 hours, but it's just pure work in a week. And so it's 92 with breaks. It is 2.5 times more than a 40-hour work week, and you do not get paid 2.5 times more. I mean, if you're getting a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, the average salary U.S. Canada is anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000 a year. So you would think you'd be getting paid over $100,000. There's no way. I don't think I got paid €1,000 the whole time I was there, and I was there for 9 months. Uh, working 90 hours work weeks, and the whole time I didn't even make €1,000.
Damn.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah, that. Fuck that. Fuck that.
I know.
Oh my god. Just
And
thinking
that,
about the lack of a work-life balance that's given. I mean, I know it's completely intentional and it's meant to
uh,
cause you to just become completely reliant on the organization.
mhm.
Um oh, and before I lose this question, did Berlin ever hear any promises or word potentially of the universe core?
Yeah, 100%. Excuse me, I have a cough drop in my mouth, so there's a little rattling. Forgive me on that. But 100%, that sixth floor, yep, we do our floors differently. You get ground floor, first floor. In America, you do ground floor, second floor. So I'm doing the European way. So the sixth floor would be the seventh floor if you're in North America. But right, it was like the top floor of the building where the library was. You'd walk off the elevator. To the right was the library. To the left was the fucking Universe Core office. So you would walk by, it had this big emblem that said Universe Core, and they had two auditing rooms, and they had a couple course rooms that nobody ever went in except for the missionaires. I think we had a couple of our staff meetings up there because they were these special ideologues. They have this special kind of model or architect model or design of these buildings, and they have to have the universe core. But the universe core, because the universe core is supposed to come in when you're St. Hill size. So for Berlin, and I talked to Aaron about this. I didn't even really realize this, but we had when I started on staff, we had about 140 staff members, and when I left, we had probably around 80. And that also doesn't include, like, that's not just a loss of 60 staff members or whatever. That's a loss of even more. There was over 100 staff members were lost and gone, right, within the first year. They were kept enticing us that when we go St. Hill size. So I got there in May. We were going to go St. Hill size in June. Then we were going to go St. Hill size in August. Then we were going to go St. Hill size in September, and then nobody talked about it after that. What Aaron told me is, like, if you're St. Hill size, you're already St. Hill size. It doesn't matter. It's not like a goal because it means you have a certain amount of auditors and course supervisors. It's not like you can't just get there. It's not like a goal. You know, it's like something you already have. Or you're there or you're not. Of course, I didn't know that. I don't think anybody else knew that. That was the big thing, Universe Core, because the Universe Core, as you probably do know, because you've mentioned it, Ollie, it's supposed to take people to OT5. And you're supposed to, like, everybody gets into Scientology, everybody wants to go OT, but like 10% of Scientologists actually go OT. And if you go St. Hill size, the whole point is to get the whole staff up to OT5. And they just dangle that carrot in front of you. And it's absolutely horrendous. I mean, the fact that they literally built two OT5 auditing rooms for the OT levels and course rooms specifically for the universe core, and it there's never, I mean, I again, maybe there when a few of the orgs in the past went St. Hill size, like Orange County and San Francisco and a few others. I don't know how long the universe core would have even gone. I don't even know if they exist, but it's just this sickening. It is. It's like it's really horrible dangling carrot because again, everybody wants to go OT. Everyone thinks that will solve all their problems too.
It's just another piece of the crazy. And as I've learned about staff culture, just all the shit, just God, I'm probably not even a quarter of the way done learning about staff. And actually, no, I'm like 2% done learning about staff because I'm just scratching the top of the iceberg. I'm trying to gather like as much info as I can about every single post that exists. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not anywhere close and then again, it's like, again, speaking with Chris, he's like, you can read as much policy as you want, you can look at as many org charts as you want,
Yeah.
but that's not covering the culture. And that's
Yeah.
another thing I still need to learn about is the culture of staff and the culture of management and how some policies may be flat out ignored in the hierarchy, how much bypassing there is going on and putting people into
Mm.
fucking danger conditions.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Do you have the OEC volumes?
Oh, I do. They're sitting downstairs on my
Yeah.
bookshelf
But the
in my
old ones
archive.
or the new one? The old ones or
I
the new
have
ones?
the I have the 1990 ones.
Yeah. So you're gonna have to get your hands on the new ones. The interestingly enough, Treasury is the smallest one of all of them. OEC3. I've read every page of that book probably two or three times over. It did nothing for me. Well, it's just roundabout BS, bureaucracy. But the one thing that I loved about Treasury and I love about Scientology is, which you probably came across. There was a policy on receipts and how when somebody buys something from Scientology, they print a receipt on a dot matrix printer from the 80s.
And of
And
course, because Hubbard said it, now they're going to have dot matrix printers until like 2057.
they're going to always have dot matrix. They're never going to change. And those, of course, it was my job to get ink and stuff like that for the printers. Not easy, not easy at all. Um, I was a supply officer, so the maintenance of these archaic, unbelievably difficult. So when you get a receipt, this is per policy. Like this is how crazy it is. You have this printer paper. There's 5 sheets of paper with white, yellow, blue, red, and green, and they're all in this dot matrix. So when you print something, you print a receipt. It has the date, the time, the person's name, their address, whatever, and it makes 5 copies. So I still remember this because I had to read that policy a lot. Okay, I think it was in one of my may not well might have been in my staff status courses, but I can't remember now. The white goes to the customer. The yellow goes to the dissemination division. It goes into the CF files. The blue, I think, goes to the HCO, which has a file. The red goes to good old Treasury because we have a file. And of course, the green goes to the technical division because they have a file.
Why can't there just be? It's called central files. Why can't that just be the centralized fucking location?
It's the amount of paper. So I had the files. There was a tech office that had the files. There was the CF, and then there was HCO. So that's literally 4, pretty much the same information. But exactly why do you need 4? And they're all color coded, of course, because all the divisions are color coded. Because as you know from your OAC volumes, Div 7 is blue. I think Div 1 white. I think Div 2 is yellow. Div 3 is red. Div 4 is green. I think Div 5 is either black or brown. And I believe Div 6 is whatever, orange or I don't know. Who cares? They're all different colors. They've got to go to these different places. And it's madness because nobody, like, was also some part of my job too, is there are people like these compliance people, these ESTOs, these settlement officers, and if you don't put a, something away, like it's such nonsense. Like if you don't put one of those receipts into the right place, then you get written up or you get in trouble, and you have to read the policy again, even if it's not my fault. Because what we do is we just print the receipt. The other people are supposed to come and pick them up. They never pick them up because they don't care, and on and on and on. Anyway, it's just a headache, and it's a lot of like busy work and little work that really goes to nothing. No achievement at the end of the day. No personal achievement. Anyway,
It's all just busy work.
busy work, micromanaging, etc. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I mean, in the end, uh, I'm glad I'm out. I'm done. I'm over with. And as I said, staff working all of those hours, and I've said this before on my channel, I don't even really like now. I've been out since 2008. That's a long time ago. That's like 17 years ago. That's a massive amount of time. That's like a kid in high school. That's how long I've been out of Scientology. And I cannot for the life of me come up with a very specific idea or a very of why I even worked that amount of time. Like I just I just did it. I'm just convinced it's not, a rational thing. I can't reason it, make it reasonable. It was purely based on circumstances, promises that never came to fruition. And I really suffered physically. Everybody did. Sleep deprivation, food deprivation. I lost a ton of weight. I became very ill because of the ravaging of my body, of all these things. Again, not eating, not sleeping, and so forth. And I can't reason why I did it. And week after week. And then another thing is, why people say, why don't you just leave? Which is something that people get all the time in whatever. I don't want to bring up something um, uncomfortable, but that's also a reason when there's an abusive relationship, whether it's romantic or interpersonal or whatever. Okay, people, why don't you just leave? In Scientology, the reason why you don't just leave is because if you are committed, like if I was 2 years as a public, and there were things about Scientology, I had made up my mind, like I was going to do this for the rest of my life. I didn't care uh, what it meant, like that. This was going to be my thing, called the sunk cost fallacy. But I was going to do it, and so if you sign a staff contract, which is either 2.5 years or 5 years, if you break that contract, then you get what's called the freeloader bill. And people, I think, really need to appreciate the fear that that induces into people, which is that you cannot do Scientology until the bill is paid off. And just that idea of not having Scientology is a big reason why, either on one side, someone has done such little Scientology that they don't care. So maybe they like I can I there's a lot of cases that I observed where someone was discovered Scientology. They might have read a book or taken a course. They were very brand new. They joined staff. Uh, they got no pay. They're gone, right? But for most people, they stay in because they've been doing Scientology, and they're either chasing these highs that you get off Scientology, auditing courses, whatever, and they're hoping for something in the future. And again, it's the dangling carrot. And so that freeloader debt is absolutely toxic, and it's a huge abusive point, and it's why people stay. So that was the reason why I didn't just get up and walk away. I knew I'd be in trouble. I knew that my eternity would be in trouble. And what can I say? I lived a few blocks from a police station. Never crossed my mind to report it. You know what I mean? Never crossed
Well,
my
no,
mind at all.
you'd read the ethics book. You'd learned not to trust the police.
Trust the police, journalists. Yep. There's a teaching when you first get into Scientology, they indoctrinate you with your ethics and the ethics conditions. And one of the things is when you do an ethics condition, I forget which one it is. I think liability. The things is you're supposed to state who your real friends are. And the conclusion is that your real friends are people that are trying to improve themselves. What it really means is Scientology, because you can't improve yourself unless you're doing Scientology. You can't do anything unless you're doing Scientology. Go back to the religious stuff. You also learn you can't meditate, do yoga, or do chanting while you're auditing as a Scientologist. So you really can't, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever, and be Scientologist because the point of a Scientologist, you're always supposed to be auditing. So they should just say, like, oh, well, we'll say, like, I should say, they will say to you, well, you can meditate, you can do yoga, you can chant, but not while you're auditing. Well, you're supposed to be auditing all the time as a Scientologist. Just tell people you can't do those things. And so it's again just them not being honest, which is just the playbook of Scientology anyway.
And that's the madness you get whenever you read fucking KSW. What is it?
But,
No bunch of namby-pamby, panty-waist dilettantes have ever done anything. You can't be half in, half out. What is? Oh, hang on. Something. The endless trillions of years of
yeah,
every man, woman, and child depends on what
if
you
they,
do here and now with and in science.
and
God, I feel stupid for remembering that.
I had to memorize those 10 points. That was one of the things when you're on staff status 1. That's when I first read KSW. It's the first thing. You open up the course pack on staff status 1. I'd never been in the academy before. I'd only done the introductory courses. So when you get to the academy, most courses will start with KSW 1. And I remember reading that. Part of me was thinking, holy fuck, this is insane. And then the other part was just like, well, I guess if this is what it has to, you know what I mean? Well, if this is what it takes, maybe then, and that's always in Scientology. Instinct is holy crap. And then the other you comes in and it's like, don't worry, it's all good, it's all good. You know what I mean? It's like, no, there's a problem. No, it's okay. So
There's the
we've
skeptic
got you.
you, and then the Scientologist you.
Yeah, 100%. And it's always the first thing. The first thing is always apprehension and skepticism, and then it's always the don't worry about it. There's an explanation for it. Calm down. It's that calm down, patronizing idea of your second self being like, don't worry about it. We'll handle it.
Don't worry, you don't know about this now, but when you get to this level, you'll learn
Yeah.
about it. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
When you cross the
And then the
wall of fire,
promise. Ugh.
but that's what it is, and it's a lot of it is self-inflicted, for lack of a better term, because yeah, obviously 100%. There are Scientologists that will, spy on you and knock on your door. And, I've had instances of, I thought I had a day off once for crying out loud, but no, I didn't have a day off because someone was knocking on my door and literally, not literally dragged me to work, but basically encouraged me to go to work. You know what I mean? So those things do happen, but a lot of it is like in your own mind. Like, if I don't do something, I'm going to get in trouble, so I might as well just do whatever they want, type thing. So you police yourself. Of course, again, there is spying, there's snitching, there's all the reporting, which is certainly around. But I think the most psychologically damaging is the self-policing, the what if, because that's like an endless worry, an endless paranoia, and so you end up just making these decisions that are not in your interest. They're in the interest of the church, but not in your own interest, and so on. And that's toxic and disastrous, as we all know too. So just horrific.
Did you get a freeloader debt when you left?
Oh yes, I did. Absolutely. And I haven't paid a single penny, thankfully. I think
How many
mine
was
was
it?
Did you remember? Do you remember the gentleman Doug Stott Kramer? Did you remember?
I've
Yeah, I
spoken to
told
him
him.
very little, but I did reach out to him at one
Yeah,
point.
we did quite a few videos with him, and I remember talking to him about this a couple of years ago. I think mine was somewhere around $5,000, 6,000
Wow,
because
that's
I.
cheap in comparison.
Oh no, it's nothing in comparison to the hundreds, because what mine was this nonsense again. So I get on staff in Berlin. I do staff status 0, 1, and I start staff status 2. I then go over to I then get sec checked in Berlin, but then I get so that's adds on. Then I go to San Francisco and finish staff status 2. I get onto the mini hat for the establishment officer, and then I get put on the Dianetics extension course for some dumb reason, and then method one word clearing and more sec check. All of that total was about 5 6,000 US dollars, somewhere around there. And I haven't paid a single bit of it since since I was kicked off staff. But again, I was kicked off staff because I wasn't qualified, but I still got a freeloader debt, and that was part of like nothing ever made any sense. Me being where I was and then going and doing all these things, it just nothing made sense. And so in the end, I said, forget it. And I remember Doug asking me, "Did you pay any of it back?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Good." It's like, okay, great. But no, I wouldn't pay a single penny of it.
Did anyone
I think
ever
they
try to
should have
smack you for it?
never. I don't know what they're doing with the SP declare stuff. My friend Sabrina in Berlin had told me, she worked in Berlin in HCO for several years. I think she ended up leaving in like 2015 or something. So she worked there consistently. And HCO is the place where if somebody gets a declaration, like an SP declare, from all over the world, it goes to the local HCO offices. So I have no idea, but I think I'm on someone's list of don't contact. I don't know if I'm an SP, PTS, but I'm on some contact list. And well, what I say is, although I have no and have never had any um, reason or want to sue the church, but I do still think that they owe not just me, but they owe a lot of people money for the lack of things that they were able to do, like lack of wages and so forth. I mean, in my case, at least 50,000 euros, if not more. So I'm never going to get it, and I'm not going to sue for it. But that's what I would want with an apology, and then okay, whatever. But I'm not going to get it, so it's okay. They owe a lot of people a lot more, and they owe a hell of a lot of people a lot more. But no, I'm very thankful. I was never going to go back to Scientology, and so once I made that decision after leaving, I just thought, forget it. I'm not going to give them any money, any ethics conditions. I'm not. But I haven't had any contact other than some random protests here and there that I've done over the years, which I haven't done one for a while. But I'm pretty content in that way.
Do you have any stories on staff or as public that you haven't told yet that you want to talk about, or anything that you may not have elaborated on that you want to discuss?
We talked about it a little bit before, Holly. Since it's Pride Month, I think I do want to kind of touch on what we talked about before when we first spoke about the homophobia in
Yep.
Scientology.
Right
Was
outside
it's
the org or whatever, and they were screaming at him or something.
there was a few instances. So two instances, which I'll just sum up again. Again, being Pride Month, I don't talk about my sexuality that much because, as I like to say, I'm not a practicing member, but I am one. So, you know what I mean. But yeah, I'm pansexual. I'm cis, but I'm pansexual, and that took me a long time. It was probably in my mid 30s by the time I was able to be comfortable with labels and whatever. Grew up, I knew I was. different. I wasn't really sure because I like girls, but I also like guys, but I also like people that were different too. And we used to say androgynous, we say non-binary now, but like, it's different, and everyone has their own different experience on how they come out. And I definitely do think you're born with a heuristic or whatever it is, and certainly I think that's something that groups like Scientology are just very toxic because they do believe that you can audit the gay away, or for lack of a better term, and I think it's disgusting because it just doesn't work. But in my case, it was never really like that. I don't know what the word would be. I wasn't open about it. Um, and so I was always pretty quiet, pretty shy. Like I knew something was different, but then I knew I like girls. So obviously, when that happens, you pick one side, try to ignore the other side for a lot of times. You know what I mean? I know this happens with all different flavors of the LGBTQ community, where you focus on one thing, you ignore the other thing, and then the other thing builds up until you have to come back. And that happens with gender sexuality. So for me, when I was on staff and so forth, obviously I was having all these questions and these ideas and so forth. So the first thing that happened was, um, shortly after I joined staff, um, we were out. We, as the Berlin org, we would go out to these major centers in Berlin. Like we were at a place called Alexanderplatz or Alexander Square. I think it's in East Berlin. Anyway, so it's a nice place. And these two guys, I was 22 at the time, so I think maybe they were late teens, early 20s. Two gay guys in a relationship came to we have this stress test table. You do the stress test. You have a table, you have books, you have the e-meter, and there was a young woman who was on staff who, I guess, for whatever reason, really didn't know the homophobic policies. She, I guess, would consider herself to be very liberal, very much an ally. And she did the stress test. They were very open about their relationship. They were both gay. They were both young. They were both in a relationship, so forth. And she ended up giving the stress test and selling them a Dianetics book. They paid for the book. And through this what we would call this 6 reg, um, got them to sign up for a course, got them to come back to the org sometime later for a course, a basic course. And I don't know how or why, or if there was some miscommunication, but when these two guys came to the org, I guess that's when word had traveled. I don't know, and that these two men, these two guys were gay, right? Um, and so I remember there was a lot of hoopla about this because in Treasury, I not only printed the receipt, as I mentioned, for the courses that this couple was going to take, but I had to give them the refund because, as they were said, Scientology doesn't. If you are gay or trans or etc., you cannot do Scientology. Like you just can't. Unless you're in like LA and then really they kind of want you to change. So there's some orgs that might be a little bit more lenient, but certainly not in Berlin and certainly not at that time. So I gave them the refund, and that was like the first instance where I was kind of taken back a little bit because I was like, huh, like that shouldn't matter. It should like if this is a church, we're supposed to be welcoming. And there was always chatter and nattering of homophobic comments, which, growing up as a millennial, I know now, obviously, that like some of the stuff we used to call our friends and the name calling and this kind of thing is really gross, but it was an at the time kind of thing. It, it doesn't age well, but, this was 2000, whatever. I don't want to make excuses, but that's just what my thought process was at the time. But then that December, um, we were out at Potsdamer Platz, which is another square in Berlin. And I was there with a small group of people, my roommate and a couple others, a couple Sea Org members. And at this particular area that we were, next to us, we were there all day. So there was a stage being built, basically from nothing, from scratch. People were coming in, building this stage. And later that evening, 7, 8 o'clock at night, what had happened was had been realized that the stage was being set up for a memorial event for specifically for gay men that had died of AIDS. Okay, and uh, like obviously the mood is not going to be very lively. Let's put it that way. And there was a young 16-year-old staff member who was from Switzerland, born and raised the second gen, and she was walking around. And in Scientology, we have these like what we call tone drills, where if something is very negative, you try to bring it up. So she was like literally bouncing around the whole place, cheering, woo, trying to get it up tone. And my roommate and all these other people were coming to me because again, I didn't speak German, and were using very horrible language when they were describing this what was going on. And there was a procession that started a few blocks from where we were, and it was a group of people, um, men and women, and they were holding signs of loved ones that had died with their picture and with their dates of their birth and the dates of their death. And they were holding candles, and they had come from this particular area and they'd walked to the stage. And just the things that I heard coming out of the mouths of my fellow staff members, of how, you know, and just I obviously don't want to repeat anything, but I'll give you a very taste of of it, which was essentially that these people, these individuals who had died of AIDS, it was their fault because they were PTS. And that is just a very inhumane way. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care if you don't have a religion. I don't care. It doesn't matter, right? In the end, we're human. You have to have some kind of human connection and sympathy and empathy. But just that amount of horrible, horrible language and blame and just it was just disturbing. I don't know. Like being in the closet, I obviously didn't set me on a different course because I still was in Scientology for another half year. But it's certainly as I look up on it now, I look at that behavior, that toxicity, that inhumanity, that demonization, that denigration of people who are LGBTQ and also of different races, because Scientology is very racist as well. It just um, makes me very sad that I didn't do something at that time. But I don't think I could have done it anyway because I would have been in trouble. And so that doesn't sound good. I understand. Like the thing I should have done is said no and stood my ground, but that would have caused things to have gone another way for me. But regardless, I'm out now and I can tell these stories and I can have regret that I didn't say anything. But I think that if there's any silver lining to this horrible stories, is that Scientology keeps getting exposed, and that even though they pretend and play that they're tolerant or that you can be LGBTQ and be in Scientology, behind the mask, it's rough. I mean, I the words I that were coming out of these staff members' mouths, I cannot repeat. I'm not going to repeat unless it's private. And if you can just think of the most utterly dehumanizing, denigrating, demonizing language that you've ever heard in your life and turn it up to 11, that's what Scientologists think of racial minorities and sexual and gender minorities and so forth. And again, I feel some guilt about that, not standing my ground. But at the time, you know, I would have been completely kicked out. And at that time, I wasn't ready to leave Scientology, and I wasn't ready to come out of the closet myself. So I don't know what that would have done and how my life would have been different had I left, you know, a few months earlier. But regardless, it is Pride Month. you know, I know what's happening in the United States here in Hungary. Very sadly, just a few months ago, the Prime Minister passed a law that banned our Pride Parade, which is the largest in Central Europe. People come from all over Eastern Europe where they cannot be themselves because in a span of a week, they can have 1 week out of the year where they can actually hold hands with someone that they love and walk down the street because they can't do that in Russia or they can't do that in wherever else. It's banned. And you know, the onslaught of what's going on in the United States is disgusting. So, you know, I've witnessed it firsthand. I've seen it firsthand. And what can I say? I was complicit complacent in one instance, but it really, really changed my perspective. And I don't want to be like that again, and I hope that I haven't and will not be like that in the future. And other than that, you know, what can I say? If the past is the past. I got to work towards the future. But yeah, it's a horrific, horrendous stories of Scientology and homophobia and transphobia. But in some weird way, um, the fact that I saw it really changed my progression going forward. And I don't know again where I would be today if I hadn't seen those horrific things. I'm not happy about it, but the fact that it did happen made my trajectory change. So whether it's positive or negative, I don't know, but it happened. You know,
Well, it made you a more emotionally strong and mature person in the end of it. So you came out better
yeah,
as a result. So at least you
exactly.
know you're not going to be like them.
Yeah, and that's when I see these things happening in the world, like what's going on here with Pride, like what's going on in the United States. You know, where I live now in Hungary, I mean, I didn't move to Hungary because I like the government. I moved to Hungary because I like Hungary. You know, the government here had a referendum a couple years back on whether children should be taught gender studies, gender, you know, so forth. And it
They
was
would call it
determined by most,
wokeism.
yeah, but even just children's books about gender identity and gender expression are banned here from libraries, from being published. That was by a referendum. No, human rights should never come down to a referendum. You know, it doesn't even matter if it ends up being a positive result. It's got to be federal law to protect marginalized groups. So I didn't move to Hungary because I liked that. I moved to Hungary for lots of other things, and I'm involved in organizations that you know don't like that and who have to live with it. And in the trans community here in Hungary, you cannot change your name on any official documents. So if you were, you know, however you identify, however you present, you can't because you know you'll be dead named when you cross a border with your passport, through your license, through your medical practices. They're always going to be dead named here because they don't recognize that there's two genders. I understand sex and gender are different, you know, and whatever. You know, there's arguments on both sides, but I think that there are multiple ones when it comes to gender, it's social, etc. But they don't recognize that here. Everything is binary, simple, and you know it's very unfortunate. And then of course marriage between same-sex individuals is not permitted as well. So it's horrendous. I hope that it changes one day. And again, I think the insight that you can get from growing up in such a resistant or being a part of such a resistant type of society that's just based in hate, um, again, is something that can, at least he can move forward and have some knowledge and try to do some good. So that's why I try again to support all the organizations here that want, people to have equal human rights and marriage and love and insurance rights, education rights, changing names, and so forth, because that's a right. And that's Canada, that's something that is at the federal level, Canadians can do. If you want to change your name to another, whatever a female and a male name is, whatever, you can do that. There's no problem. Your medical care is not affected. Wonderful what's going on in Canada. I love it. I didn't move here because because I somehow love what's going on here, but it's at least worth the fight here to try to change anyway. So,
Now, I had Peter ask, what are some popular cultural foods in Hungary?
oh, well, what we like here is the most typical dish that you could find would be what we call Bechi salad, which is Wiener Schnitzel. So there's a lot of crossover with German and Austrian food here. Um, and usually either we gave them the recipe or they gave us the recipe. So in case of Wiener Schnitzel, that was of course from Vienna, and then it came to Budapest and Hungary and whatever. But also you might know it as strudel, cherry, apple, apricot strudel. It was actually first made in Hungary. We called it rétes, and it's a Hungarian dish that was then adapted into strudel by the Austrians and later the Germans. We like to eat fish. I'm a big fish eater. I'm a kosher vegetarian, so that means I don't eat meat unless it's koshered, and kosher meat is extremely expensive. I don't like it, the fact that it's so expensive. So I end up just eating fish. That's just me. Some people I know are vegan or etc., which I tend to be on most days anyway. But we have a lot of fish here. Carp is very popular here. Um, and so on, and cod and sole and whatever, salmon, which we get. But mostly people here eat pork, which I don't eat. But even in Budapest, if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, there's tons and tons of restaurants. I went yesterday to a vegan Mexican restaurant, had a chimichanga, vegan cheese, beans, and I love this particular place. So you can find anything you want. There's also a lot of good Asian food, good Indian food. But in Hungary, we have our traditional food. It's very thick, very heavy, very fattening, but also very tasty.
The worse it is for you, the better it tastes.
Oh, it's so true. Like when I go to America, I love like the Waffle House and IHOP and Red Robin and Perkins and Applebee's and Taco Bell. It's like, oh my God, there's so much variety of food. And none of it's good for you at all. Nothing there. But man, is it delicious.
Yep. We got a lot of those places, at least where I am, because I'm not in the middle of like a rural community. So you could drive down
Hmm.
the street, go to a freaking Chinese restaurant. We got a ramen place.
Ooh,
What else do we got? We got the IHOP down the road. We got pizza. We got fucking a shit ton of Italian food.
ooh, yum.
But I did have
Yeah,
another question from a guy named Marv. Did you know Sabine Weber or something? She never went
Sabina
to
Weber.
war.
Sabina Weber was the director of special affairs. I knew her very well. She's a horrible person. As most people are. I don't know what she would be like outside Scientology, but her Scientology personality was bad. She's one of the reasons why um, I went there without a visa. She encouraged me to stay to get the residence permit, and then even when I couldn't stay anymore and I wasn't allowed, she still tried to entice me to stay and basically stay illegally. So yeah, had a lot of personal contact with her. Just very incompetent and always for the greater good, for the greatest number. And yeah, recommended a lot of illegal things that I should have done. So not a good person in my eyes.
And then did you know a Peter who has an organization helping ex-members in Hungary? Do you know him?
I don't know him. No, I
Okay.
know that there are people here. Like one of the things is, although there wasn't ever a large amount of Hungarian Scientologists, there are a lot of notable Hungarian Scientologists. We had, I think, about 4 or 5 Sea Org members that were Hungarian in Berlin, and then we had another couple staff members that were Hungarian. So at one point in like the 90s, like just after the Cold War ended, 90s and early 2000s, a lot of religions, of course, came back to what we used to call the Eastern Bloc. And a lot of these groups, Jehovah's Witnesses, Hare Krishnas, Scientology, did pretty well for about a couple decades. And then I live on the other side of the city from the ideal org, and randomly, like 6 months ago, I went to a stationery store on the other side to pick up an order that I made online on the other side of the city. And I was walking and I see the Scientology ideal org, like I completely unplanned. I walked out of the subway, I'm walking up the street. There's a big mall across from it, one of the largest malls in, this is literally across the street from the org. I saw 2 people in there. This big, massive ideal org. All the lights are off. It reminded me of Berlin. One at reception, and then one person hovering around reception, and the whole place lights off. It looked completely dead. When I was there, just before I joined just before I joined in Berlin, I guess this would have been 2006, I want to say, or five. I went to the org that was in a different location. Then I went back again, I think when I was on staff because I had a vacation, actually had a vacation 1 week and went to Berlin. I went to Budapest, excuse me, from Berlin. I had a cousin that was getting married. Anyway, I went to that other org. It was bustling. Like it was like, or bustling, whatever you call it. There was so many people. And I remember going into like, this was like 2005, 6, 7, 8, there were people everywhere. There was like staff members. I think they had, I don't know how many staff members they would have had, dozens of staff members, people walking around. They had one of these buildings in Hungary that has like a courtyard. It's like a very particular Baroque style with a courtyard, kind of like a square. I had a couple stories. Go everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And the course room was full. And now there's maybe a few people, in a much nicer building. But yeah, yeah. It's just thankfully dead, as it should be.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of the ideal orgs, even in the US, are pretty much fucking ghost towns.
Hmm.
But
That's all it is.
it's nice to see that all the activism is working at least.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you can just like when I first started in 2005, if you Googled Scientology, you could find some stuff, but it was very hard to find either like really good criticism. It was much easier to find Scientology.org. So like when I Googled Scientology, I found mostly positive stuff. Um, now, there's the varieties are different and also testimonies. On TikTok, on Instagram, YouTube, of course, there's all these testimonies. And again, I don't know if that would have necessarily, I'll never know if, I decided to join just a few years later, how that would have affected me. But definitely when I joined, there just wasn't much in the realm of like negative information or information that was about actual ex members that was easy to find. It made it easier for me to join. And, that was just that kind of a thing. But I think now when most people will trust Google and they'll trust ex members and they'll be like, oh, well, this is very controversial. I don't think I want to join. That's fantastic.
Well, and now it's like most people don't even need Google. You think about it. You ask people,
Mhm.
"Oh, hey, do you know about Scientology? Oh, the Tom Cruise religion?
Yeah,
Oh, the slavery thing? All the Sea
yeah.
Org members and the beating and the destruction?" It's like
I
their
thought we
first
misgathered.
thought is no longer good shit.
No, and it was at a time, you know. Like even throughout, sometimes you could probably say, "Oh, it wasn't too bad, maybe benign," but thank God those days are over.
It
It's
seems like
very negative now.
Scientology died with Hubbard.
Yeah, pretty much, exactly, 100. Hubbard was no angel, as we all know. I'm not an independent. I have nothing against independence, but I find it very tough to say that it was all Miscavige and not Hubbard. Just my personal opinion, which whatever. But yeah, I Hubbard was no angel, but Miscavige was certainly in that relationship is more of the demon. If you want to make Hubbard into an angel, but whatever.
Yeah. But all right, we've been going for what, about 2 hours?
Yeah,
But I gotta get ready to start taking care of some stuff today. I gotta do some
no
yard work.
worries.
But either way, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me today.
Well, thanks,
And
Holly. I appreciate
you've
what you
given
do.
me a hell of a lot of information when it comes to staff to
And
really process. It's maddening.
it is, and I hope whatever final we call it, what no EP, the end phenomenon of your channel, whatever it is, I hope that your needle will float and you'll get the epiphany, and it will probably be, holy crap, this is all bullshit. And I'm sure you already have done that, but I'm hoping that after you read everything and after everything gets coalesced, you'll have even more reason to say, holy crap, this is all BS.
Oh, trust me. When I said it's like when I said that I was looking at Tom DeVock's blog and learning shit about Int, um,
Yeah.
I don't just have Int. I have Able. I have CMO. I have the whole. I have fucking everything. I've got
Oh,
like 25 different singular events, including the New Year's Eve 2000 event. So the
wow.
Madeira Rock Festival back in the 60s when fucking or 70s when Portugal threw rocks at Hubbard's ship. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
David screaming about gold bullion buried somewhere at the Int base. A couple of like mass shootings or whatever, especially the one at CC Portland.
Oh God, yeah.
But yeah, no, and I've got a list of like hundreds of different people and their posts that they held and how they like the more I go into this rabbit hole, the more pieces start going together. Like I'll read about one person, it'll be like, and that's the thing I've noticed with Scientologists and former members, it's that most of the time you don't have to ask for this information. They'll not only will they tell you their story, they'll mention someone they worked with, and then they'll go into a story about that person. So then you get
Mm-hmm.
information. That's how I've been doing it. It's been information through secondhand accounts. It's just a
Yep.
lot of it. It's just, oh, I knew Cheryl, and she worked as the CMO Gold or something, and then I'll be like, oh, who's Cheryl? And then I'll find Cheryl in some other article. I'm like, oh, that's what she did. That's what she was involved in, and yeah,
Yeah.
it just doesn't stop. But you have been extremely helpful to my research, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've talked about.
Well, I want to do this again, hopefully sometime in the future to fill in some other things, and I appreciate that very much.
Hell yeah, that sounds good. So we'll keep in touch. We'll figure something out. And I think that's it. I want to thank all of you guys for watching this and hopping into his stream or mine, especially Peter. Thank you, Peter, for hopping into both.
Peter,
And
Joe
yeah,
was in mine. These are all my. When I was streaming, we used to have a designation which we would call the Mark Fossils. So many of these are my Mark Fossils, my devoted,
I've got a
exalted
couple
Mark
of them in here.
Fossils. Yeah, they're all good.
I
But
did have,
I gotta get. I do have to get going, Holly. I'm really sorry.
oh, yeah, you're good.
I have to. But yeah, thank you so much. Sorry. Oh, oh, oh.